Hi there, it is Jo from Minerva, and today I'm here to do a little sew along, a revisit actually, of the Hovea jacket. The reason I'm revisiting the Hovea jacket is my previous video, this one here. I've shown you how to lay up fabrics with a wadding, how to do quilting techniques, so you will be putting all of the quilting through those layers of fabric in that video. But there's been a little development because Minerva have introduced a quilted fabric. It is absolutely amazing, and it will transform making any kind of padded jacket. It will take it from a skill level 2, which it says on Hovea, down to 1, because all of that work has been done for you. The fabric is a cotton sateen, so you've got that little sort of sheen, and you especially see that with the layers of fabric, so you can really see that sateen finish. It's a cotton finish, not a satin finish. And on the back you've got a plain fabric. You could just as easily use your fabric this way round and have a funky lining, or you can choose the fabric on the print side and use that as your print design. This is Bouquet Boudoir, and I'm going to be using this to make a Hovea jacket today, and I'm really going to show you how simple this pattern can be if it's been slightly out of your reach before, if you use our quilted fabric. For the Hovea jacket, you might be making your own bias binding, so it's got there's a couple of different views, so you can do one with a bound edge or you can do one with a banded edge. Either way, you'll be needing a fabric to go with that. So this is the core range sateen. I've picked a pink just to make that pop, but you could just as easily have chosen the black or the navy. And you'll need to know how to make bias binding. There's a couple of different ways to do it. I'm going to use my binding machine, but you can use the little handheld binding machines, or you can fold it on your ironing board and press each side. Information on that is in my binding video. This video is particularly good because it shows you how to make continuous binding, so that way you can make quite a big length of binding by just using one square of fabric. If you've seen that before and thought you'd like to know how to do it, that's in this video. The Hovea pattern goes in sizes 0 to 20. That's a dress size, but that doesn't mean so much. The bust goes from a 32 up to a 46, but it is a really large ease garment. So I've made a size 14, and by the look of it, I think it's going to be a little bit big for me. And I have made a size 14 before, but because I was quilting it myself, I ended up like chopping a few little bits off in different places to even up my quilting. So you might need to check out the finished garment measurements and see if you need to size up or size down. The patterns on the front, the ones shown, the one with the tie and the one with the big pockets, aren't the only options that you can use. You can really switch this pattern up. There's a tie front, there's banded pockets, there's bound pockets, there's a belt. You can have it as a little short boxy style, you can have it mid-length, and you can have it calf length. So if you check out #Hovea on Minerva's website, you will actually see a really diverse amount of jackets, all different styles, all different fabrics on all different shapes of people. There are a few things and tips you might want to think about if you're sewing our quilted fabric. Get a couple of test pieces and just check them under your machine. Are they going through? You might need to change your stitch length. I normally use 2.5, but I did just ease out to a 3. In some places where you could see the stitching, I did 3.5 because I wanted it to match the stitching length of the stitching in the fabric. I also used a walking foot because that just helped the 2 layers of fabric just go through the machine at the same rate. When I used my normal foot, sometimes they sort of started to slide apart from each other, but the walking foot just kept them gripping through. I used a normal thread, a Gutterman all-purpose thread, and I also have put in my machine a universal needle, and it's just a new one. Any needle with little burrs on the end will pull through some of this and they will get knotted up in the wadding inside, so make sure you've got a needle that's really clean and sharp. Cutting wise, you will find it difficult to cut this fabric on the fold. If you fold the fabric in half, it's quite thick and quite bouncy, and it's difficult to cut accurately. So let's take a look at some cutting tips. So the best way to cut it is in a single layer. You need to observe the grain line. You can use the quilting marks as a little bit of a guide, so you know you're getting. So I'm going to match the end of that grain line with that corner of a diamond and make sure that it doesn't move. And now I'm going to draw around the pattern piece. You can pin it on if you want to, but I'm going to use my chalk pencil. It's got a nice sharp point, it's really accurate. Mark the center point here and mark the center point at the top. And now, using those marks that I made, flip the pattern and draw round again. I can now cut out the back piece. It's in a single layer, but it's the shape that I want. It's much better than trying to cut quilted fabric on the fold. You must remember when you're cutting in a single layer any of the pieces for the Hovea jacket that you remember to flip them so that you get opposite pieces. So for the front pieces you need a front piece, and then to flip and do a left piece. I'm using a continuous bias method to cut a piece of bias binding from a square. It's quite an economical way of cutting fabric on the bias by using one square of fabric. You can find out about this on my video, how to cut bias binding, and there's a couple of different ways there that you can take a look at. I'm using my bias binding maker. You can find out about this. I have a video showing you how to use it. And I wrap all of my binding onto a card so that it all stays nice and flat. First of all, we're going to put the pockets together. You'll have chosen your pocket depth. Depending on which coat view you've chosen, you'll also be making sure that you get your pockets in the correct positions by marking the notches. I'm making the small mini pockets for my slightly shorter jacket. You can switch the pockets in and out on this pattern. You can either have no pockets at all, mini pockets, or the deeper pockets. You just need to look for the pocket placement. I'm going to sew the binding right sides together to the fabric, and then we can turn it over to the wrong side. On the wrong side of the pocket, we're going to fold the binding over that raw edge. You can use either long pins here, or you might want to choose to use clips. From the right side, your pocket will have a bound edge. I've got a contrasting colour here just because it's easier for you to see. I'm going to hand stitch this down. If you're really confident on the machine, you might also want to use a top stitch on your sewing machine along the edge of the binding. That's your pocket edge finished. There are optional linings, but if you're using our quilted fabric, you don't need it because it's already all lined on the back with the second layer of quilting. Position your pocket onto the bottom of your coat, so there's pattern markings, notch markings, and obviously going to be following the edge of the curve. I've tacked that in place, so that pocket is ready to be bound around the edges at a later part of the pattern. So you'll be doing that with two pieces, the left front and the right front. We're going to construct the main body pieces now. It's really simple, it's just the shoulders and the side seams, but you will need quite a bit of space. So if you tend to work on quite a cluttered table or a table full of other stuff, or you pinch a bit of space from somewhere to do your sewing, you might need to just clear the decks a little bit the quilted fabric is quite stiff. You can't just fold it the same. You need enough space to move the pieces around off the foot plate here. Now we're going to put the back with the right side up facing us and with the right side of the fabric touching, so that's right sides together. We're going to pin and sew the left and right front pieces onto the jacket. Again, I'm using clips. And I'm also going to match up the sides, sandwiching in that corner of the pocket. So we've got 3 layers there. So you might want to just slow down on the machine when you sew through that area. And we're going to bind the edge of our jacket. I'm going to take some of my binding that I've made, and we're going to use that same technique that we used on the edge of the pocket. So I'm going to pin the edge of the binding to the jacket, sew in that crease line, and then I can fold it over and it will enclose all of the raw edges. I'm going to do the first pass on the machine, then I'm going to put it through the machine a second time, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. So it's all sewn down, all of those edges are enclosed, and now I can press it from the right side and I'll get that nice flat finish on my seam, and on the inside everything's neat and tidy and it won't fray. Next we're going to put the sleeves together. They're really simple, they're folded in half and sewn on the underarm seam, but you'll be repeating that binding technique that we have been using throughout to make the inside of your jacket really comfortable. Fold the sleeves in half, pin those in place along the underarm seam, and then we're going to use the binding to bind the edge. We do that twice. The jacket edges have been finished, so I've done the inside edges. I actually sewed that one down flat as well, so I bound it, then folded it to one side and hand stitched it down. That's made it really flat so it won't be really bulky on the shoulder. So with the fabric right sides together, so the sleeve is the right side out, going to insert the sleeves into the jacket. On these edges you want to have one seam allowance going one way and one seam allowance going the other. It will just reduce the bulk on that corner. There is a shoulder notch to match up with the shoulder seam. If you've got some bias binding hanging over, you need to trim that off. We're going to match up the raw edges and sew the sleeve in place. I'm going to do that on the other side as well with the other sleeve, and then again we're going to use that binding technique with the binding that you've bought or made to go around the armhole, and you'll be covering over the raw ends of where your binding is in your other intersections. When you're putting your sleeves in, it starts to get quite a structured piece to get under the machine, so it's best to sew the sleeves from the inside, and then you won't be catching any of the other fabric. Turn your sleeve through just to check you haven't got any puckers or it's not rippled anywhere. And then go back to the inside so that you can maybe layer out a little bit of the fabric so that your binding will fit on comfortably. So once you've got your sleeves in, you can then bind them. You can use bought bias binding, so that's what I've got here. I was just saving my other bias binding so that I've got enough to go around the outer edge for the ending. So you can mix it up. You can also take this opportunity to use up spare bits of fabric to make your own bias binding. You can make it really funky on the inside if you wanted to. Just make sure that you've gone over the ends of the binding from other parts and everything is enclosed. I really like to hand stitch it down. It's quite a relaxing job, and I know that I have a neat finish, because if I try and sew from the right side, sometimes it looks great from one side but I'm catching it and not catching it on the reverse. The main parts of your jacket are now together, so it's starting to look like a jacket. And the last part of the pattern is to take your binding all the way around the edge of your jacket. I like to start and finish my bias binding not in the centre back here. I like to just do it just by the shoulder, to the left or to the right of the shoulder seam. You can add a label here at this point, and if you're adding the ties, you will be putting the tacking the ties in, so that when you put the binding on, the ties are in, raw ends are enclosed in the binding as well. You'll be using the same technique on this single layer as you did when you did the pocket. So I'm going to whiz around there and we will have our jacket finished. It's a good idea to try your jacket on now to check for sleeve length. You can have your sleeve bound and then turned back if you want to have some of the nice padding showing from the inside, or you can have it to length with the binding along the edge to match the sleeve. That's your choice. It's a style choice, so you can try it on, get your sleeve length and then decide what you'd like to do. A little tip for you when you're adding bias binding to this project is to put a little bit of temporary glue on the ends of your bias binding, so that when you fold the ends over, they stay put. Put a little bit of glue on the next layer as well. Then that will stay at that right angle shape even when you pin it on. It won't change shape or billow out, or the raw edge won't become exposed. The bias binding will go all the way around, and I'll show you how it joins at the end. Because that's glued down now, I'm able to get those ends much more even. Than if I didn't. If I don't, then the corners tend to splay out and then the raw edges are on show. So finish binding your sleeves. If you've been hand stitching, hand stitch. If you've been machine stitching, machine stitch. You need this side seam to be pressed to one side. Make sure it's the same as is going the same direction as on the underarm. Once you've sewn them on, you can decide if you're going to have your sleeves rolled up. If you are, then you might want to put your binding on the other way round. So if you're choosing this as a feature way to wear your jacket, then you might want to have the machine line on the wrong side and the hand stitch line on the right side. It depends how you're going to wear it. Okay, here's the jacket. It is roomy, it's very roomy here, so do check the finished garment measurements. I've made a 14, I think it's probably a touch big on me, but I've made this as a sample. These are the mini pockets, the front tie, sleeves rolled back. It's absolutely beautiful in this print because I'm wearing it with jeans, I'm letting the white show through so the fabric really has a background to show itself off. Inside you've got those beautiful bound edges so you can't see any of the join. I've got that different colour binding on the inside of the arm. That was just a sort of money saving thing, and even though this quilted fabric is at quite a high price point, I've made the Hovea jacket with 2 layers of fabric and wadding, and by the time you've added up the 2 layers and the wadding inside and the time it takes, it does actually make quilted jackets accessible to lots of different levels of sewers. Just for those of you who like to know, in the comments, I'm wearing the Sanford set. So this is the top. It's a grown on sleeve top. It's in collaboration with their pattern designer from Sew to Grow, and I've made mine in a double gauze. I hope you've enjoyed that video. I can't tell you, I've made both jackets. I can't tell you how much faster using the quilted fabric is. It really is such a simple pattern with just the shoulder seams, the side seams and the sleeves, but without all of the quilting, it's come together really, really quickly. But also I did enjoy putting the layers of quilting together, and if you're doing a stash busting project where you're putting together some patchwork pieces, or you're using up different pieces of fabric that are harmonious together to make one jacket, then there's definitely a place for quilting your own fabric too. So just make sure, if you need to know lots of information about that, you go back to my first video on Hovea, or if you want to check out any of my other videos, they're on Minerva's website or here at the Minerva YouTube channel. The Learn to Sew ones give lots of different skills, so you'll find any sort of details that you saw today that you're not quite sure of, you can check out in another video. We also have sew-alongs, pattern pairings, new pattern releases. All of that sewing inspiration is here for you to enjoy. We would love to see if you have made anything, especially a Hovea coat, or especially in this new fabric. So do share your makes over at Minerva, make a free account, upload your photos and your fabric choices, because we love to see what you have been up to. Do call again for more sewing inspiration.